I think May of 1976. I was 10 years old, and I got my first Enid Blyton book. I was gifted. I remember it was famous five go into a fix. And I read it and I was hooked. I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to be a writer. So I think today I'm going to share my journey as a writer from then. Okay, maybe not all the way from then to now. And I want to thank KM University, though I know this is my brainchild, but it's nice to see a child grow up and have its own ideas and come back and, let you know. So thank you for, inviting me to, give the keynote speech when I complete like 4 decades. It's kind of like a milestone, so feels nice. And thank you for Anupam for this idea. He said, why don't you talk about a career and also what happened along in the industry, right? In technical communications in the world, what happened along with it? It would be interesting. So yeah, Anupam has a lot of good ideas. So hopefully this is one of them. He has some other ideas as well, like ice cream biryani, which may not be so good. That we'll discuss over lunch. But hopefully this is a good idea and all of you enjoy it. I don't know if you can read over there. It's a small haiku that I always share with all the new hires in my team. This is what motivates me, right? To build teams, to write, make a difference. I strive for balance. I think all of you know I'm all about balance. Okay, thanks to Kali, our graphics designer, for creating this very wonderful infographic about my journey, which includes not just professional, but also personal, my education, things that I do in the industry. So I know it's very, there's a lot of stuff over here, but I will break it down and we'll go through it decade by decade because it's just too long. I know many of you have probably know my story and I've heard some of these before, but for a few of you, it's new. So hope there are some takeaways. And as Anupam said, maybe later on, all of you can also join me in your reminiscence about what happened in the industry. So 40 years ago, firstly, how many of you were there 40 years ago? Okay, about, yeah, well, about, yeah, 2/3, which is good. But, I don't know at what stage, as Anupam said. So we'll get started. Teething. So in 1985, I came to Bangalore. My dad was in the army, as you all know. I've grown up all over, finished my education in Lucknow, and I had a bachelor's in English literature. So question, bachelor's in English literature, 1985, or maybe even now, what kind of jobs can you expect to get? Teaching also, they asked for a B.Ed. Mm-hmm. Admin, yes, yeah. Yeah, so pretty much, yeah, admin. Yeah, actually, I'm not really qualified for anything, So what I was doing when I came here is I was just applying to everything in Deccan Herald, and whoever called me, I went. So my first interview was with Windsor Manor, the hotel, and I joined that. But at that time, computers were just getting into India. So it was very exciting. I'll talk more about that in the next slide as well. And I was very curious about it. So I actually joined a diploma in computer software. That time, that basic COBOL Fortran. And at the end of that, I got placed in Chowgules as a database programmer. So there was something called DBase, which was one of the earlier databases. So DBase 2, which is like really early. And yeah, but all the time, I think while I was working, I always tried to study something too. So I always wanted to do mass communications or journalism. That option was not there in Lucknow University. So I did that along with work. And at the end of it, I actually got called by Sonata Software. And I don't know how they kind of got my resume, maybe from some placement agency. They said, oh, you have something, a background in computers as well as communication. Do you want to try and do technical editing? So I was like, what's that? I had no idea. They said, okay, do a consultancy and then see if this works out. So that's how I started, and I just got hooked. I was like, this is great. This is where my passions meet. I mean, obviously writing, as I spoke about, but also technical. And Sonata had a lot of great apps in those times, one of the earliest product software companies in India. So it was wonderful to work there. And I'll talk in the next slide about how it was, what tools we used, and what we did over there. And I think when I completed my journalism, I actually also got, in Business Computer, which was a computer magazine at that time. I was a journalist for them as well as 4 other magazines. And I was freelancing for a while. While I was with them, I also, did some projects for Infosys and a few others. So as I mentioned, I kept doing diplomas, travel and tourism, and all of you know that I enjoy travel. And also in business accounts, I did economics and geography in college as well. So I do have an interest in economics. And that actually helped me get the contracts with Infosys because they were coming up with banking software at that time. And a lot of the initial applications at that time in banking, because banking was a big market. So all the big, Canara Bank, Vijay Bank, all of them were getting computerized. So that's how I got the job in Wipro and then with CMC. So in CMC, I was there for like 5 years. So the first decade of my career, the first 5 years were maybe hopping around a bit, but that is because I think, yes, was picking up qualifications, I was getting those opportunities. And but when I got to CMC, finally settled in for a good stint over there, banking applications. There was also the Swift terminal. And then Tata Elxsi was at that time actually Ratan Tata's brainchild. And he used to come and give us our annual general meetings. That time he was just there, very normal, very casual. So yeah, I've seen him. And there was a lot of hardware documentation at that time because at STR graphics. And so we had to document the multimedia, the cards, the RAID, networking routers, and all of these were the initial years of, this is probably pre-liberalization in India, where a lot of these companies were starting. So this was my individual contributor track, starting as a tech editor and just steadily sort of going up, senior tech writer, and so on and so forth. So the first 10 years was a very steady sort of climb up. And I was the sole tech writer. So that was another thing. In those days, there were maybe 2 other tech writers in the industry. In Sonata, there was Susan Alexander, who was my mentor, and I think one of the first STC India presidents as well. And that's about it. So I used to just be along with engineering or whoever else was there. I was just another member in that team. We'd all go for lunch. We were all friends, and that really worked well. This whole challenges we have now, we're not getting reviews in time, or we're not able to collaborate, that was never there because all of them were my friends. So it was we talked about automation, so a lot of it was very interesting. So what else happened at that point in time? So I thought I'll share with you, since many of you may not be so aware. Okay, so this was the computer that I actually learned on. This is the Commodore 64. I don't know if any of you have even heard of it. This is one of the very early CMOS processors. And so this was, even before the standard IBM and all the other desktops, which are 8080 onwards, but this was pre that. So this is where I learned. And then what I was using was WordStar. Have any of you heard of WordStar? One person. Yes. So actually, this was a text-based kind of system, no GUI, nothing. But it was very fast. It was quite simple. And actually, even though it has been discontinued, people still use it. I think one of the writers I heard was still using it. I think George Martin, who writes Game of Thrones as well. I think Game of Thrones is based on his book. And he still uses WordStar because he still likes that very simple, easy kind of interface. And how did I learn at that time? There were not tech training, there wasn't industry, there wasn't these kind of sessions. It was just on the job, here's the software, play with it. Of course, with some coaching from Susan. And looking at other documents, that was my best practice. And what was my, the best documents that I was told was actually HP documentation at that time. Way back then, it was the HP printers set and all of that. And I'll show you later what it looked like. Even the HP printer had a set of 10 documents, printed documents. So this was the era when we had actually printed documents, and we had to, actually when we create this and we would send it to the printer, it would get typeset. He would send back copies, so we had to manually sort of proofread. So not, online proofreading and things like that, and send it back. And I had actually forgotten how we even did images. So I think we did draw. I reached out to Susan, and she said we used to draw, or we used to create it in some other sort of graphic tool and give it to the printer. So a lot of work, things which are so easy for you nowadays. It's like, it was so much of work back then. And what really revolutionized the industry at that point, our technical communication industry, was desktop publishing. So with the advent of Ventura Publisher, any of you heard it? See, this one person. Okay. So Ventura Publisher was one of the first, desktop publishing systems which actually had typeset software, right? And gave you a template which could be sent to at least a photo typesetter, or again to HP laser printers. So HP, I think, has been there through my career. And that really revolutionized everything and helped to do a lot of things which we would send to the printer. We did it ourselves, the formatting. The formatting was earlier it was only content. Then with this, the format also kind of came into our control. And now I think later on, Ventura got bought by Corel. So this Corel Draw, I think, is still there. So a lot of I think that's the current version of this system. Yeah, this is the HP laser printer. So since I was a sole tech right on the team, the laser printer used to be on my desk. And I think I always used to know whenever anyone is looking out for a job, because they'd come and ask me for printouts of resumes on the laser printer, because it was a nice copy, right? And what happened to the animation? Just trying to press. Can you press? Yeah. This even fewer people might be knowing. Netscape Navigator. Anyone has heard of that? Oh, good. A couple of people. So that was when the World Wide Web actually, sort of came into being at that point in time. So Netscape Navigator is one of the very initial web browsers with whom everybody was very fond of. And then afterwards, Internet Explorer came in. And then it became the whole Microsoft versus the rest. Now we have like Apple versus Android, that kind of a debate. It used to be Netscape versus Internet Explorer. So I was a diehard Netscape fan till they finally kind of couldn't stand up to the might of Microsoft marketing and had to go out of business. So this was the time when it was pre-liberalization. There were all the big, Indian computer companies with their TCS, Wipro, HCL, few more were coming. But, and the computers were just coming into India, right, at this point in time. Yeah, this was the doc set, what it used to look like. So many printed manuals. And even, it was very satisfying actually, because when you do your project, you can actually see a nice physical book at the end of it. So in a way, that little girl's dream was coming true. It was books, but in a different way. So I used to feel good about that. Okay, so here are some key takeaways. And I had lots of takeaways, but I don't have time for all of that now. Maybe I'll write more blogs about it. But there was a few things. I think, as you noticed, I always kept learning, kept studying either diplomas, and whatever the engineers were doing, I joined in all those sessions, whether it's C, C++, they're looking at SSAD tools, whatever. All kinds of learning. So I just kept learning. And I've always stayed in touch with everybody, and it was just not any conscious networking, but I just like to be in touch with people, and I stayed connected. And I think many of you know, after my first job when I applied, my 40 years, I haven't applied after that. It's always been somebody has referred me, or somebody has given me a reference to the job. So the importance of networking definitely is there. And also one learning for me, like when I was in Winsor Manor, that my first job. So I was an introvert, I guess still am, and very highly sensitive, So, but this was a very customer facing sort of a role. And one day, I think I just had a meltdown. I just started crying, and my boss's manager's like, "What happened? Did any customer yell at you?" And I said, "No, nothing. It was just maybe I was overwhelmed. It was too much." And he said, "Okay, go and take a break. Take 10 minutes off, have some tea, and come back." So I just sort of had a meltdown. And then I realized if I was going to be like this, I'm not going to be a successful working professional. I had to overcome that. I had to kind of get a little thicker skin. I definitely had to, kind of communicate. Of course, I think that was a great learning for me. We had to, kind of smile and, kind of respond quickly. All of those things, I think every job has taught me a lot. But there I did learn that I need to sort of communicate a lot more. So that was... I'm a very different person from when I started my career, and even from school. I think when I meet with my classmates, and they just can't recognize me as a person as such. So that was the first decade. So I will accelerate to the next decade. And this was when I moved to Singapore. So again, it was one of my engineers who worked with me. She had moved to Singapore and said, "Hey, they're looking for a tech writer here." And I was like, "Sure." And then I went over there. I worked with DEC at the time, Digital Equipment, if you've heard of it. It's one of the great companies, apart from IBM. Unfortunately, great technology. Unfortunately, went out of business after some time. And lots of cool things we did over there. I worked with they were working with a semiconductor manufacturer at the time, but also created a multimedia kiosk application for Papua New Guinea, of all the places. And it was something called Authorware, Macromedia Authorware. I don't know if it still exists, but Authorware, Dreamweaver, I think went, Macromedia is nine, it's now bought by Adobe. So it's part of the Adobe tool set. It's one of the pre-Captivate times. So I think now we use Captivate and all of those things. From there, I moved to the US to Trillium Digital Systems. And again, there were a bunch of, actually all my friends in Tata Elxsi, they had moved there. So then they tried to kind of call me over there. So Trillium was telecom protocol software and all in telecommunications. And it is a startup. So it was great. I think when they had never hired a tech writer before. So there were 30 people, all 30 of them interviewed me, and they didn't know what to ask me. They're like, "Okay, what should we ask you?" I said, "Maybe you can ask me what are my projects." So I was giving them suggestions what they can ask me. But what's interesting about that is, the whole setup, that was highly exciting. Of course, my rise was rapid. I joined as a tech writer, come instructional designer. That's how I kind of got into training at that point. Then became a lead, became a manager, became a director, then director of the documentation team as well as the training team. And all this happens in a startup, but it was a great environment. I learned management for the first time then. I was a people manager, but my team was largely in North America. In the US as well as in Canada, we had a team in Vancouver. And much later, we started in India. So a lot of learning and how to set up a whole company till it finally gets IPO or gets bought. That was the goal. They set up all those certifications, ISO certifications, and you're part of that whole energy of the company going through that process. Finally, it got bought by Intel. And what's interesting is Intel bought Trillium, and then we, as a tech writing team, got absorbed into a central doc team of Intel. But the Trillium product got sold to Continuous Computing, another company. And that product in turn got sold to Redisys. So it's right now with Redisys. So if you go to the Redisys website, they still have the Trillium documentation that we worked on all that way back. So that was, it's pretty cool to see that there is something that you all do, it still has a legacy. And just you should feel proud of all the documents that you come up with because people are still using them. They had celebrated 20 years of continuous computing. They called all the old employees and all of that, and they actually said, "See, we're still using the training that you had created." So that felt pretty cool. So Intel, of course, was software as well as hardware with the communications and the communication chip business. There were teams, again, initially I was in North America, and then I moved to Intel Bangalore. So after about a decade outside India, that's when I moved back. And I've talked to a lot of you about, having your own personal development plan. You should, because that helps you. And I use, as you know, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. I use that as a sort of template. And that helps you give some direction. So when I had sort of visualized my future, you have this vision board you have to draw. So I'd drawn a house in Bangalore and one chair and with me sitting tea over there, So when the opportunity came in Intel, they said they were winding up the LA office where I was. And we had to either move to, Intel Portland, Intel Bangalore, or leave, right? Take a package and leave. And so then it was a no-brainer for me because I'd already visualized it that I want to be in Bangalore. So while most people try to stay on in the US, but I was pretty clear I want to move back. So I moved back here. Lots of learning in terms of leadership. Again, I've written a blog about how I got into tech writing and my first leaders and what I've learned from them. So I won't go into all of that, but a lot of learning over there. And that's when I also stayed with training. I became in Intel University. I was doing for management soft skills training over there as well. And my last role, I moved into facilitation, which is out of documentation. It's more of a training sort of role. I was there barely a couple of months, and it was a lot of learning those months. I think I learned about facilitation, all of those things, but it was also the role where I got redeployed. That whole team, was redlined. Redeployed is like a fancy word for getting laid off, but Intel did that in a really good way. And yeah, and while I was in the US, I also want to mention I kept doing extension classes at UCLA, which was close by. Lots of other things. It was French, horticulture, travel writing. So for me, I think people ask me like, okay, what keeps you motivated right after like 40 years or whatever? Firstly, technical communications, as I've always said, is a very vast actually field. So you can keep looking at things. Every 2 years, I think I've done something different or learned something new. And if there's nothing new here, you can go and do something new in your life because you always bring that back to your workplace. So keep learning, keep doing something new. I think that gives you the energy to accelerate. So at this point in time, what is happening in the world? So the whole Silicon Valley just boomed. I mean, it was there for a long time. As you know, HP is one of the pioneers of the Silicon Valley. When I went to Palo Alto, I saw the garage where Hewlett and Packard started the company. I don't know if you have ever seen it, but it is amazing. If you ever go to the Bay Area, do visit that. And that's where they used to actually sit over a little dining table with a red check tablecloth, and if they had any issues, they would sit down and sort it out over there. So a lot of the values that we have in HPE today also, comes from there. And I think the whole Silicon Valley also they have fostered a lot of it. So there was this whole boom. All those big companies were coming up at that point. Anybody remember names of companies of the whole Silicon Valley at that point? I mean, now, what are the big companies which are out there? IBM, Cisco, yeah. What's that? Dell, yeah. Yeah, all of those. Actually, all of those really grew and, sort of flourished at that point in time. And at that point, the whole Bangalore phenomenon started, right? And unfortunate term, Bangalore. But it started with outsourcing, like sort of an outsourcing model where it came up as a low-cost center, and we have, and even centers being R&D centers being set up here, but more as an extension of maybe the US or anywhere else. But another thing which happens, the MNC started coming in. Till then, there was just a lot of Indian companies, which you saw that I had initially worked in. So, but by the time I came back, a lot of the multinationals were already here. And I had the good fortune to kind of work with a lot of them as well. As far as tech writing is concerned, there were a lot of inflection points. Inflection points are those which it makes a change, right? It makes a change in the industry and what happens. Digital printing. I think a lot of things we take for granted today, right? We have these big printers on every floor, but that was something which came in which enabled us to actually print. So we were still printing documents, mind you. We were still printing and shipping documents. We had a printing division, a shipping division in our companies that time, and we would imagine the cost and ship to worldwide. Training people would fly in to like LA at that point and get trained. But still that, made a difference. And I was talking about how we created screens, right? Just manually, we used to create screens manually. Screen captures, that was so revolutionary for us. Like, my goodness, it saves so much time. We can just capture screens. I think, of course, I think in Windows itself, there was some, but I remember Snagit was one of the earliest we started using. That saves so much time. And all the image creation tools. I mean, again, things which we were doing manually or we had to ask the printer to do, or we used to take photographs and share. All like I think, and who has kind of fostered a lot of these image creation tools? Which company? Adobe, yes. So I think Adobe actually has really been revolutionary in our world that way. And they created a lot of, they had Illustrator always, but they went around buying companies and now they have a whole suite of products over there. And online information. So I kind of saw this whole transition from print to online. As I said, till then, even till I left the US, or even when we came back, it was still print at that point in time. But moving to online, and it was one is, of course, the tools and all of that, but it's also mindset shift, right? No, we want the documents. And, it's like now, even still now, they say we want the PDFs. It's hard to sort of change that. But trying to get buy-in from everybody in the company as well as the customers. It was a huge customer experience change for them. So we moved all, and that single-handedly moving all the documents online, moving all the training online, it just saved the company literally millions of dollars, because of just moving everything online. So that was an amazing time to kind of see that whole shift in the industry. And a lot of our industry, technical communication organizations started then. Tech Writers of India Twin mailing list started when I was still in Singapore. So I was like, oh, cool, there are more tech writers in India now. And I joined that. And it was fun to be on the mailing list. And we had people like Edwin Scow, right? I kept seeing his name everywhere. And he's coming here today later, by the way. He'll be moderating a panel discussion. And the Society for Technical Communication, which was our largest organization worldwide. It started in the US, and I was fortunate to actually attend one of my, their global conference there. There were like 3,000 writers, and I'd never seen 3,000 tech writers before. So I was like quite amazed to go there. My mind was full of ideas. So I was like bursting, and I came back and started so many initiatives with the team, which is something which I keep doing with all the teams since then. Various teams are even here, as you know, right? So that's why I think doing the initiatives is something which you do. You're doing programs, but you also do initiatives, but because that always, it comes back to the programs. That's what helps. If you just keep focusing on releases, you're not going to get the innovation or the ideas or do things differently. So I think it always helps to kind of do that. Yeah, so a lot of stories about STC as well, but we'll leave that for another day. And then, this, of course, I think this everyone knows. So Microsoft actually sort of changed the way we work. They almost forced us to change because they just bundled it onto all the laptops, right, with the Windows OS, the Microsoft Office. So everyone now is very familiar with Word and Excel and PowerPoint and all of that. But so all those early different applications which were there, I think sort of became standardized with Word. But of course, Word also Microsoft had its limitations, and that's why we kind of went into Adobe continued. So Adobe actually bought FrameMaker, and then eventually, I think Adobe FrameMaker was also a huge game changer at that point in time. And they did the whole PDFs. So at least that was a suitable substitute for printed documentation, I think, which our customers were comfortable with. And they started with Open Office. Yes. Yeah, Sun Microsystems. So that was cool. Like when I was in Singapore, I went for one conference, and they actually served us coffee in Java, like Java is a coffee, right? And it was written the Java symbol. That was when they launched Java. So it was very cool to see that, the launch of Java at that point in time. Okay. Yeah, so I think my takeaways then was to explore career adjacencies, right? As I said, TechCom is a vast world. I've written a blog, 24 lateral paths for technical writers. So you can see that as well. I had written it like a long time ago, but I still keep referring to it. And I find that I don't really need to update it because all of that is still, works. And the connect with the community, right? Our industry organizations, which I started connecting with, and I'm still in touch. And as you know, I always encourage all of you to be in touch. I think you learn so much by connecting the industry. We are a small industry, so it's easy to share best practices. We're open to sharing best practices across companies as well. And my learning was actually, this is a personal learning, just in terms of work, stay close to the product, because any time when I was a little away was actually, I've been laid off a couple of times in my career. So I think Intel, yes, I moved away from doc. I was like, if I was still in documentation, I wouldn't have gotten laid off. But so that was sort of a thing. The closer you are to the product, I think maybe the safer you are. But it was an opportunity for me. So when I was at Intel, they had some consultancy company who comes and helps you through the redeployment. And I like that whole process so much, career counseling and all of it, that I actually joined them, Carpe Diem. So I kind of joined them, and I was consulting and training and all of that, and that's why my interest in coaching and training also started. I also started writing my first book. Actually, I started writing then, If Then Else, my fiction book, which I just released a couple of years ago. But I started writing it then. Um, in hindsight, I wish I'd finished it because I joined back work with BEA, and then it was hard to work as well as write. But it was just something I kept doing. Whenever I had time, I would sit and keep writing on my book. So that was a wonderful experience. So BEA got bought by Oracle, so I went through another acquisition again. A lot of learning about I think when you have doc teams, right? I think there are various strategies you can use. You want to centralize them, decentralize them. How do you deal with tools, processes, standards, and whatnot? But that's a whole presentation by itself. I used to manage APAC teams there. It included the teams in China, and I've been to Beijing. So I think it was a good experience over there. Then from Oracle, I joined Sapient Nitro. It was an interesting role in professional communications because it sort of brought together all the different aspects of my career, TechCom training, but also I've done Marcom and Corporate Com. Being the sole tech writer, you do anything to do with communications, you do it, right? So, and especially in startups. So this role actually had all of it. And it was highly exciting, but I did move to Cisco, but just because it was a much larger role, as you know, at that time, I think there were 200 writers and 10 views and all of that. It was a centralized team. So it was a great opportunity to go to Cisco, where we migrated to DITA. So what was interesting is, so Adobe, as you know, also started FrameMaker, the HTML. And XML, somewhere around 1999, somebody came and gave a presentation to our Intel Tech Pubs team about XML. And they said, this is never going to work. This is going to, it takes too long because the ramp up was steep to go from where we were into XML. They're saying it's 99% of effort, but over after 10 years, there'll be only 1% of effort. But I think the leadership didn't buy it at that time. They said, no, this XML is never going to work. But yeah, it came back, I think, a decade or so later. So what I've observed is, I think in technical communications, right, trends, I think, stay for a while, stay for a decade at least. Even when you go for industry conferences, you go once in a few years, that's good to stay updated. But it does kind of come back. And so there was a lot of things that happened to me personally also, as you know, like I had got Tarana and I adopted Tarana, which got into my life. And I did advanced masters in global management, which was across, 4 continents. So lots of, again, back to the learning. So even in Cisco, as in Duke University, we did some leadership training over here. When I joined HP, in Columbia University, they kind of sponsored me for some training, so that was cool. So I got laid off from Cisco also, and then so I was managing the TC World conference, the TC World as program managing that. I was actually moderating a panel, and Manjunath Atre was there on that panel, so he would be my future manager. At the end of the panel discussion, he said, "We're looking for a person," and I said, "Okay, here's my resume." And okay, that's how one of the ways in which I kind of came over here. So yeah, you never know how things work out. Anyone know this symbol? This I doubt if anybody would know. So this is Confluence. Actually, so in Sapient, we were, as I said, it was more of internal role, knowledge management, all of that. So we use Confluence a lot. It's wiki-based knowledge management. We would put the documents there, crowdsourcing information, right? The whole company could kind of contribute. They could put in, we would curate. We were content curators, maybe way before our time. But now I think that time will come with AI. But yes, that's a lot of what we used to do over there. And I talked about all the challenges with doc teams being acquired and integrated, a lot of learnings over there, the centralized and decentralized, and of course, working globally, which is a reality. This nothing to do with any company, but you know what this is? You can recognize this is a unicorn. So you know what are unicorns in the business world? $1 billion startup, yes. So this was also the time of unicorns in this decade. Any unicorns that you can think of in the technology field? Big ones. OpenAI, even before that. This is Facebook. Apple, Facebook, Amazon, all of that. That really changed, I think, the way we used to actually live, because being a book reader, I would always go to bookstores and buy. And then it became like I'd go to bookstores and browse, decide which book I want to buy, and then come back to Amazon and find it's cheaper there and buy it on Amazon. So, and from buying books, I think Amazon just spread to everything else, and it sort of really changed the way I think we live right now. So these, by the way, these are corn kernels. So these are my kernels or nuggets of wisdom. So it's not just about embracing change and being open to change. Being open to change is one step, embracing change the next step. Get ahead of change. Like I think when being acquired and trying to lead my teams through acquisitions. So I think I learned that when we first got acquired in Intel, we were a little resistant. We wanted to do our own standards and keep to our own tools and all of that. But we learned quickly that doesn't help. So when we got acquired by Oracle, I just reached out to the doc leader and said, okay, this is who we are, and made a presentation and all of that. And that helped our entire team to stay intact and move. And we were actually just, treated, I think, very well in Oracle, where a lot of engineering, I think people had to leave and all of that. And also, this sounds philosophical. My nephew Ryan talks like this. He's only 13, but he talks like this. Yeah, what goes up goes down. What goes around comes around. That whole thing about teams get. I started here as a centralized team. We got decentralized a few years ago. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? And yeah, even careers. I'm not hung up on titles and things like that. As you know, I like the idea of just being able to make an impact, even if it is with two people. And yeah, I think this is also, and I may have written a blog or spoken about it. I don't remember. Politics, sometimes it's like, no, I don't want to get involved in politics, but you should be aware of it. Politics is just how people deal with each other. And we need to, and in a larger context, how teams or, kind of everything. So just be aware of it. You don't have to, indulge in it, so to speak, but learn how to manage it. Right. So I think for your own career, I think this is something which is helpful. Hi, Edwin. I spoke about you earlier about how on Twin and various mailing lists used to be so, such a familiar name over there. Yeah. So the last 10 years, I think, okay, not that it has been, but it has, I think, definitely best for last. I think this has been the least toxic of any work environment I've been in. HP is a great place to work. I would say that now, and to anybody who, even in the future. Yeah, I think career-wise, I have to be honest, it was maybe a little bit, ever since I moved back to India, it's kind of been on a plateau. But I think you need to understand what the opportunities are and make the best of it, right? But yeah, if you remember, when I first joined, I did a team charter workshop with all of you, and we repeated that a couple of times. Maybe I should do it one last time before I retire next year, by the way, next May, and I'm out of here. This is my last Illuminar, which is why Anupam asked me to talk about this. And we had a lot of cool things. Is Akhileshwari here? Yeah, there she is. So yeah, we started our first internship program from Christ University. We got Akhileshwari and a few others. That's something which has worked very well. Of course, this whole KM University innovation, I think things which Anupam Chaitanya did have won industry awards, navigation maps, and we've had so many transitions, and we've done a lot of external conferences here. So which has given, I think, a lot of good program managers have come up, Sunita and Sharath, all of them over here as well. And now we're into AI, right? And other things which have happened for me, especially, hi, Asha, especially between when on the pandemic, right? So when we were at home and I was trying to entertain my daughter, that's when I started the YouTube channel. So I got into more of writing. I co-authored my father's autobiography, Burma to Bangalore. And then in my YouTube channel, I used to interview other authors. It was something we could do at home. My daughter could record, and she used to do all my marketing and all of that. So that was something cool to do. Blogging I used to do on and off over the years. So that's something I picked up again. Also experimented with audio podcasts. So as you know, I started Manage the Docs along with Asha, and who has just come in, and Akash, who's now in the US, which is for documentation leadership in the industry. And so we experiment with audio podcasts, and of course, recently I got married. So I think most of you know it, but yeah, this is something which happened to me personally. So my final, yeah, then what is, and what happened in this time, of course, I'm not going to speak much about it because this is now your present time. You know all about it, how we moved into data. And what happened in the Indian industry is really, we moved from that whole outsourcing module and going up the value chain. And along with them, us as well as tech writers. So we're not just as a low cost sort of a team, but you're adding value, and then you maybe even leading. So I think that's something to remember, that we are, um, when you meet people, I think they have different perceptions about, across the globe, that is, about where we are as a Bangalore team or an India team. And I think it's important for them to set the context at where we are now, right? We are here in the value chain. We're not here or whatever it is. So I think that helps. And yeah, this, do you know this? You should know this. What is this? ChatGPT. Yes, yes. ChatGPT, Chat HPE that we are all doing now. So my final nuggets of wisdom or whatever. As I've said, the personal development plan, you know what you want from work and from life, and assess the whole industry, the company, the team, prospects, and be realistic about yours, because all of us at different stages in a career also may have different opportunities, but be realistic. I think that helps us to have, stay a long, sustained career and do well in it and be motivated and be happy as well. Be self-motivated. I think that's the one thing. I think it's, if you rely on your company or your manager or anybody else, then you're just going to keep moving along with the wind. But be self-motivated. You find what your inner drive is. It could be anything. It needn't be work also. For me, it is maybe writing. But what, if I go back to that whole chart, and for my 10-year-old self who wanted to be a writer, yes, I did publish the books the way I wanted to. I mean, published my third book recently, right? And I will keep doing that. But also, I think finding a career where that works. So they always say that, okay, you either follow your dream, or you should, follow like a worldly path or something. Or if you follow your dream, you're going to, lose out on just money or something. But I think there is a way. Be open to adapting your dream also, so that it gets real in some way. Actually, I read somewhere that whatever you thought of when you were 10 years old is what you end up doing in life. So think about it. You can go back and think about what you thought of you wanted to become when you're 10, and some aspect of it may be there in what you're doing right now. Okay, so what does the future hold? I don't know, but yes, for me personally, as I said, after retiring, I'd like to continue coaching, something I enjoy. I'm doing my certification from ICF, as you know, the International Coaching Federation, so I continue to do that. Of course, keep writing. I have the next 25 book ideas in my head. That doesn't make any money though, so maybe I'll do a little bit of training and consulting. I love to travel, as you all know, and spend more time on hobbies. For, I think, our world, definitely, I think in India, as we've been talking, it's been coming. I think Digital India is the whole, it's come of age, and I think that's going to kind of continue. AI cloud obviously is going to be there. And AI is accelerating at a pace which is faster than all previous accelerations, right? So I think we have to, and especially in the content space, we have to very quickly, have to get on board and understand what it needs to be. I think, yeah, which will only lead to things being more connected and personalized, as Navdeep mentioned, maybe immersive, more in the hardware space, but think like AR, VR, and even when we think of content, think of how can our content, get more personalized and answer questions just on the fly. And as a professional, I think it's important to stay relevant. So never rest on your laurels. Oh, I have 10 years of experience or 15 years experience. It doesn't matter. It's just what you did in the last year that matters. I think look at your performance, stay up with it, and stay relevant, right? Yeah, and of course, we have to learn a lot more. I think we have been trying to learn about AI as a team. All of us are learning and teaching chapters to each other. Because I think the tech writing industry, yes, you're not going to lose your job,